Hi, I'm Govindh Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 349. And if this is your first time here, Paper Napkin Wisdom is a podcast where we explore simple ideas that can create profound results. Each episode, entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers share wisdom that they'd write on a paper napkin if they wanted someone to remember it forever. But today's episode is a little different. You see, sometimes the most powerful wisdom doesn't come from a statement. Sometimes it comes from a question. And this is one of those conversations. My guest today is someone I've had the privilege of speaking with before on this podcast. And every time we talk, I walk away thinking differently about people, about conversations, and the invisible dynamics that shape the way we interact with each other. Christina Harbridge is one of the most fascinating students of human behavior I have ever met. She's the founder of Allegory Inc., a strategist, a teacher, and someone who has spent decades studying how humans communicate, how we persuade, and how sometimes we simply just completely misunderstand each other. But here's what I admire most about Christina. Where most of us step away from a conflict, she steps in, not to argue and not to win, but to understand. You've probably even seen those moments, whether it's in a meeting or a boardroom or even in the comment section online, maybe especially there, where people are firing verbal missiles at each other. The temperature rises, the conversation shuts down, and most of us think the safest move is to move back away and shrink away from it. Christina does something very different. She walks right into the middle of those conversations, and somehow the temperature drops. People listen, and the conversation changes. So today, instead of asking Christina to bring a pearl of wisdom written on a napkin, I brought her a question that I think every leader, every entrepreneur, and every human navigating today's world is trying to answer. How do we step into difficult or challenging conversations without making them worse? How do we stay grounded when emotions are high? How do we listen when our instincts tell us to defend? And how do we create understanding in a world that increasingly rewards division and derision? Christina has spent decades exploring those questions, and what she shares in this conversation might change the very way you think about conflict, curiosity, and even your own reactions in the moment. So get comfortable because this one starts with a question. Let's dive in.
Here, I'll do
Christina
jazz
Harbridge,
hands to start.
jazz hands.
Reverse
Welcome
jazz
back.
hands.
Reverse jazz hands, jazz hands. Welcome back to Paper Napkin Wisdom, Christina. And it's so fitting that you start your day with jazz hands with our visit. It's fantastic. It's great to see you. Uh, I am thrilled. I'm always thrilled to speak with you, and I'm really excited about picking your brain on something. So, you've been on Paper Napkin twice already, and this is your third time. And we're doing something a little bit different where it's not just people sharing a pearl of wisdom, it's sometimes me asking a question. And we've had some powerful questions that have come up, and I know you're gonna maybe talk about the word powerful in that sentence in a second. But what I'm curious about, and one of the things that I just really admire you for is, and there's a lot that I admire you for, but one of the things that you are literally the best of the world is walking into conversations where the tensions are high. People are heavily invested in their opinions and are firing cannons at each other. And you just walk in to those conversations online and offline everywhere. And I want to ask you, how do you do that? And you do it so gracefully, respectfully of everyone all the time. And even the people who are the most triggered come down several notches when you're there. What are you doing? Like, first of all, what makes you jump into those conversations when the rest of us sort of turn away? And then, you know, how do the rest of us learn from you to wade in and have those meaningful conversations with people that maybe we disagree with?
Hmm. A lot of ways to answer that question. I think the first that I always start with is when people ask me why I do it, it's just acknowledging that I have incredible privilege in this world, that as an entrepreneur, I don't have a boss. I don't have a lot that would keep me from going into hard conversations because the cost is lower for me than a lot of folks. And I have unearned sometimes I just have unearned influence in rooms just because
Well,
of my
so you
privilege.
but y what does that so there are entrepreneurs, and so many entrepreneurs listen to this show,
Mhm,
and they say,
mhm,
"No, I don't have that
mhm.
privilege because, if I speak badly, then my customer goes away and my employees, my team members, I'm accountable to them, and we have more bosses than others because we're accountable to the banks, we're accountable to clients, we're accountable to our teams." Um, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question someone could ask because I come from a place of believing in absolute, I'm trying to think of the right word to explain it, abundance. That as long as I'm congruent and authentic with the values I'm selling my customers, if a conversation I have causes them to go to someone else, then that was not the right relationship for either one of us. And so if someone is working with me because they believe I am a set of principles and it turns out that I'm not, I will fill that gap with people who are. And so I just come from an abundance mindset that let me give a silly example. I used to have, when I was in my 20s, I got a lot of crap for being young. People were always giving me crap for being too young. I started my company really young. I looked young. I was young. Damn, I miss her. And I was getting so much crap for being young, so I put my title on my business card was princess, and it would flip people out. People would be like, I would never do business with someone with the title of princess. And I said, I just saved us so much time. You can look at the business card and know that we're not a good fit. And so I see going into tough conversations or being kind of bold about what we believe in, what we think is a gift to people. I'm not losing business, I'm finding business.
What a powerful reframe. So I know this about you. So people are gonna say, "Christina, no, that's not the way it was when you started." And I'm like, "No, that is this is you waded in to the collections industry, which is to this day very male dominated and very, do as you're told, threats and missiles and firing bombs at people if is the way you start, and then you back off when you get what you want. You have always approached it from a different perspective. So it doesn't surprise me at all that you had princess on your business card. I just can't believe I didn't know that until now. So what a
Then I had
privilege.
to change it because it was a total lie. One of my team members pointed out, "You're not a princess, you're a mischief executive officer." I'm like, "Mischief? You're exactly right."
Yes, yes. I that is absolutely true.
Mhm,
So you also started off, so you said that you had 2 things that you walk into those conversations with. One is this incredible privilege, and
mhm.
I want I think that the point that I want to underline here is this incredible privilege is a choice. It's a choice of your perspective. You've chosen to believe in abundance first, right? So that if I'm not right for someone based on what I'm saying, we're saving both of us so much time because we're gonna fall out of alignment spectacularly at some point. Might as well come earlier and everybody's happier. And you've got that energy, resources, and spirit to give to somebody else, to a client that really is tapping into who you really are, right?
And I don't report to someone, and I just have unearned just by the way I look, I just have some unearned influence and privilege that not everybody has. And so there is a I just think there's a dedication or something that I owe back to society because I've been given so much for stuff that I haven't worked for.
What is this? What do you mean by unearned status or
Unearned,
influence.
so, if I'm sitting around a table, my age gives me, wisdom. I seem wise when maybe I'm not. When in my 20s, I had to hustle for voice. Now I just have it because I'm older. As a white presenting human, I don't have to deal with some of the stereotypes that completely eclipse some groups that they have to fight against. I don't have any of that.
Yeah.
And
Um,
so and because I've studied human behavior, even my gender, there are gender dynamics that happen. They don't affect me because I've studied it. So it's a privilege that comes with that. I don't have imposter syndrome or any of that crap because I've studied it.
yeah, that makes sense. And not only have you studied it, but you've put it to work, right? This
Yeah.
is it's not a book that you read and then put up on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
This is something that you've walked and talked and breathed.
Created.
You've created.
Yeah.
You've documented it. You've written the books actually. So and you've lived that. So I think this is really important. You also said, that your clients, would pick up on your congruence. And I think congruence is a really big word. It's a special word to me. And I really think that and then you said congruence with my values, that your actions are congruent with your values. Is that something that when you were learning this new approach, this approach that you have not only learned, studied as a student of human behavior and written books about, is this something that you learned how to be congruent, or is it something that you always were? Did you have experiments with it?
Yeah. I think my whole life has been an experimentation that I just feel like I have a duty to give back as a human who has benefited so much from a pretty jacked up society. But I also think that we're all in a system that is not super user friendly, and that a lot of our behavior as humans has nothing to do with the conversation we're in. It's in a system that isn't functioning the way that people work. So, an example would be a lot of us go into these conversations focused on IQ and EQ, intellect and emotion. But through all the study I've done for the last 30 years, physiology comes before both those things. So IQ and EQ is way too late.
Mhm.
And so trying to be clear in the answer to your question, yes, I act outside my values all the freaking time. When my physiology is hijacked, when our physiology is hijacked as humans, we do stuff that is the opposite of our values, and those are our hardest days as humans. We don't like that, but we do it. The strategy is to notice sooner that we've done it, and then what do we learn from that? How do we move forward? And
That
so
was
staying
such a
congruent with our values depends on how our physiology feels that day.
so what do you do to tap into your physiology day to day? How do you know that you're gonna have a high bank day, meaning, your buckets of physiology are high and you can do heavy lifting, and days that aren't as high?
So what I do is I listen to all the things that we're told as people and then question if whether or not that's true. So one thing I hear over and over and over again is get comfortable with discomfort. That is the worst thing anyone can do. Because if I get comfortable with discomfort, I'm going to not notice. I'm going to soothe that discomfort in a way that messes with my outcomes. So to answer your question, moment to moment to moment, I'm noticing sooner that there's been a shift in my physiology and not soothing it. I'm getting curious about it. So it's a practice of not trying to be comfortable. It's a practice of trying to be curious.
Trying to be curious instead
So
of
the
comfortable.
saying should be get curious in discomfort. If every leader on this planet, if we could just have that one thing, leaders would stop saying, let's take that offline. They'd stop like pushing things away and they'd start sitting still. We'd listen more. We'd be more open to ideas outside of our perspective. And we're so often like one tiny conversation away to better outcomes, yet we don't have them because we soothe our discomfort with distance.
Right.
We push it away.
And yeah, I totally feel that. I remember years ago you gave me
the great counsel. It was in the green room after one of our podcasts, and you're so great at questions, and you were asking me about how I was doing, and I gave you some waffly answer, and you dug into it very quickly, lovingly, and I said, I keep on getting in these bad loops, and said, what makes them bad? You coached me through it, and then you said, well, isn't it great that you noticed it before you
Yeah.
did anything? Isn't it great? Like you used to just go right into it, and now you're noticing it before anything even happens.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? And it
Yeah.
changed how I felt about everything in that moment. That's the kind of thing you're
Always.
talking about, right?
So the answer to your question again, what do I do every day? I'm doing it right now. I'm celebrating when I notice that I've dipped in some way or I'm uncomfortable and I'm not trying to solve it. It's an aha, not an oh no. And so we're often an oh no, and then we have to fix it really quickly.
Yeah.
And so it's a delicious celebration because those dips in our physiology have value. They're not a problem to solve.
Right. And we can get curious about it. The does that require us to have a sense of confidence about ourselves? Is part of it is a sense of identity? Like, I think a lot of people miss the fact that they're outsourcing their identity, to other things, and they're not spending time about, looking for what they really want, what really makes them curious about their own about the world, about their role in it.
I love your questions. Confidence is either a jacket I put on or it's who I am. And we can have both kinds of confidence, but I think the jacket we put on is kind of exhausting because it
Mm,
requires some level of fake it till you make it. Like again,
right.
these sayings that I hear that I'm like, that's crap. Fake it till you make it.
Total
So
crap.
let me just give you an example that might not create more clarity for people. I used the frame imposter syndrome earlier. Imposter syndrome, I hear this phrase a lot. I was on a panel with about women getting funding, and there was, I think, 4 women and 2 men. And so the questions were to the men first about, what do women need to do to get funding, investing funding. And the guy said that we've invested in women, they have better, we want more women, but the problem with women is imposter syndrome. They gotta believe in themselves. They gotta have confidence. They did this whole riff about women. Our problem is confidence. The next woman on the panel says, yeah, you go girl. And I'm sitting there saying, the reason why women don't speak up is not confidence. It's integrity. It isn't a confidence problem that's causing women not to speak up in meetings and talk about things. It's often integrity, that they're often thinking through what the perspective, the right answer. So we keep mislabeling things as confidence that are often that person's actual talent.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let's give people an example because I understand what you're saying,
Hmm.
but I think what people may misunderstand is that that it's something they're doing, not something they're being. And
Yeah. So
and
let's say, for example, a product manager is in a meeting and they're given a new idea from the CEO. Here's an idea. What do you think? What's your perspective? And that person's talent is rigor, being user friendly, experience testing. They're not going to pop off with a random example until they've had a second to study it. That's not lack of confidence. That's excess of skill.
right,
But that person
right.
gets labeled, "You don't speak up in meetings enough."
But
No,
she
what
doesn't have the data
yeah,
yet.
speaking up would not be living their skill, and so people often label things as lack of confidence, they're actually excess of their skill and their talent. So if humans would stop the labeling, the easy answer, and start being like, "What does this say about my talent?" That's where real confidence comes in. Because then that product manager can say, hey, uh, ask that CEO for more input, ask them more questions, which CEOs like talking. We'll go on and on if you stay in ideation with us. keep that CEO ideating and then say, okay, CEO, 24 hours will give you a whole perspective of how that's going to impact our users. Here's why, blah, blah, blah. But many of us get told to have more gravitas instead of facilitate that person so that you can get enough information from them to then give your talent.
That's right. So yeah, I love the distinction. And in this particular case, what that person could do with that excess of talent and capability could lean into that in that moment and say, I'm not prepared to give you an answer yet. I need to check on this, and this, and I'll get back to you with an answer. And sometimes in certain circles, we label that as a lack of confidence because you're not able to give me an answer right now. So I'm projecting my version of what confidence is on somebody else as opposed to just understanding who they are and getting curious about what's going on for them, right?
Right. And I think I'm causing us to go down a rabbit hole because I always go into these deep, like
I love this.
nuanced things. So let's look at the example you just gave. If that product manager says, I'm not prepared, that is what makes it about their confidence. If that product manager asks a couple more questions and says, I'm going to deliver, we will deliver tomorrow by end of day how this is going to impact your 5 deliverables. Like, I'm not saying I'm not ready to give it to you because that focuses on me. I'm giving the person what they really want, which is this idea should reach this outcome. So part of this is that product manager understanding that it isn't a confidence problem, but she's got a CEO who ideates all the time. So how does she take all that ideation and deliver what the CEO wants? They're ideating to improve some outcome and then speak back the outcome to them to give time to get the right perspective on this.
That's brilliant.
And so that's
So
a nuanced thing on communication, but it's really user-friendly
yeah,
communication.
super user friendly.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to your point about noticing sooner your discomfort and
Yeah.
getting curious about
Yeah.
the source so that you can ask questions out loud that might satisfy them.
And if HR puts that product person in an executive presence class, which no one can tell me what executive presence means, but they put them in a class to make them a better presenter, the organization is going to lose that person's talent because they'll get really good at BSing.
Right. Making
They'll
stuff
get
up. And
really
that's not,
good at
yeah,
popping off with a perspective that then the CEO runs with, and they will never get the rigor, the talent of that human who understands users better than the CEO ever will.
that's brilliant. So let's take this back to, and I'm going to say challenging conversations, right? When people are
Yeah,
firing missiles at each
yeah,
other.
yeah.
Now people's physiologies are activated. People are their dander
Mhm,
is up.
mhm,
They're
mhm,
in full attack
mhm,
survival mode.
mhm.
Even though there's no physical threat in that online threaded Facebook conversation, people are feeling threatened without a doubt, right? Like that's what's really going on in people's physiology. They're feeling unsafe. How do you wade in? How do you get into that
So the
and
first thing
give
it's
that safety?
feeling honored to do it. That's the first thing I already said, and I think the
Feeling
second is
honored to do it. You didn't quite
honored.
say it. You're
I feel
honored
honored.
to be able to walk into
Honored.
that conversation.
Yeah, I feel honored to do it, and I feel a duty. It feels very dutiful. People often give me crap. They're like, "Why are you in the comments section? You're never gonna change their mind." And I'll often say, "They're not my audience. That person is not my audience. My audience is everyone reading it. My audience is the people who are reading it that might want to hear a different perspective or to help people think differently or to help people feel less alone." And so it's an honor to do it to increase understanding. The second thing is, I think one of our challenges as entrepreneurs is we deploy empathy as a strategy rather than a feeling. Empathy as a strategy is exhausting. We're trying to feel, have empathy for people before we talk to them. It's like a step. It's like the rapport step. Empathy as a feeling, walking into these, no matter what that person's saying, I flood myself with what is that person facing? I'm flooded with empathy for the human that gets my biochemistry hard to throw off. Like I'm flooded with biochemistry that makes me stable, more connected, more clear. I'm not coming from adrenaline cortisol, I'm coming from a different place. So walking into that conversation, I just have a better operating system.
Mhm.
I'm thinking clearer because I'm not all hiked up with hijacked.
So at the end, I don't want to say at the end. At the end of the day, you're human, but you're an entrepreneur. You're a very successful entrepreneur. You've built many businesses. At some point, I think there's a part of us as leaders that we want to know that we're making progress.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that? Because what you're saying is so beautifully human and so difficult to measure that you're making a dent at all. Because the people who are reading and listening that you talked about, Christina, they're not they're not necessarily always reaching out to you and say, "Thank you so much for sharing a different point of view.
Never.
I really
Very.
appreciate hearing a different voice." No one's saying,
Yeah.
but
Here's what I
the
hear
people
more
with the
than
missiles are
anything.
are firing.
Right. What I hear more than anything is I would never do business with you. You're destroying your brand. You could own the world, Christina. Like you could be the next, Oprah Winfrey. Like they give me out Simon Sinek. You could be if you would just shut your mouth. That's what I hear the most. I get a
I'll say that
lot of
to you.
people. Oh yeah, people message me, well intended. They're trying to protect me, but they're like, if you wouldn't do that, you would be bigger than you are. And so I don't hear a lot of kudos. I hear a lot of evidence that I am on the right track because criticism is a sign of talent. The more criticism we get, it's often the more talent we are displaying. And so let's go back to the physiology thing. When people's physiology gets uncomfortable, they soothe it. There's 982 soothing mechanisms that we have measured,
Okay,
watched, and seen.
so number 1.
One of those is criticizing. When people get uncomfortable with a hard truth or a hard conversation, the way that they soothe their discomfort is criticism. And so the more criticism I get, the more I'm like, I take it in and I play it with my values. Do I want to be Oprah Winfrey? Oh, hell no. Like that would be the worst thing ever for everybody to know who I am. That is not what I want. So I'm doing it right. You're never going to make that person change their mind. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm not trying to change their mind. So I could go through all this, but that would get boring. But it's really the criticism. Is the criticism aligned with my values and why I'm doing it? Or is it that person soothing their discomfort with discomfort?
Is that the way we is that is that the common thread behind the 900 plus soothing mechanisms? Is it that we're soothing our discomfort with more discomfort, and we're just putting this bigger blanket on top of the other blanket, and then putting another blanket on top of it, and then we're underneath all these suffocating blankets at the end of the day?
We're soothing our immediate discomfort or dip in our physiology. It's an immediate thing. It's often at the expense of our outcomes. So, CEO leaders, we often, when we're in ideation mode and we get a tough question from the person who's going to execute, we'll say, take that offline. That's a soothing mechanism. That person's asking a question that we want to stay in ideation. They want to move to execution. We dip, and so we push that away, and then we complain about the meeting after the meeting. Why is everybody always having the meeting after the meeting? I thought we were aligned. We're not aligned. It's because we keep soothing our discomfort by taking discourse offline. And so I don't know if it's blankets or layers, but it's human. I still do it. I mapped out all these soothing mechanisms. I did 3 of them today. The goal is, did I notice it sooner? Did I notice? I'm like, I was doing that. And the sooner I notice it, that's the win.
That's the win, yeah. And
Yeah.
and we say and I think that one of the things that's really powerful that I've heard you say before is that when we label a conversation, that too is a silent critique. It's a silent label that we're putting on it to soothe and create distance between ourselves and the conversation. Powerful conversation, challenging conversation,
Yeah.
difficult conversation.
Yeah.
And even, like, let's take that offline. How many times have I said, you're getting I'm I don't wanna get stuck in the weeds. This is all stuff that we make up to get away
Yeah.
from something.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we're, boy, this would take hours to fully explain. So, discomfort. So, I try not to label it as discomfort because there's some of us who lead businesses that don't believe we have discomfort. We just don't believe that. So let's call it a dip in our physiology. Our physiology changes. Something changes in the way that we're interacting with another person. Labeling is a way to soothe that. So this is a tough conversation. This is a hard conversation. It's not. It's a conversation. Like if we get out of the label, the purpose of a conversation is an exchange. And so if I'm in the comments section, I have a strategy, that sometimes I go in with tension, sometimes I go in with empathy, sometimes there's a whole strategy. I don't do it the same way every time. But the goal of whatever strategy I'm using in that comment section is to hear more from the other person. It's to learn more of their perspective. That's rarely to change their mind. I'm there to learn more.
Have you ever, seen that great Kobe Bryant interview on BET where he's sitting there in front of a group of students? Have you seen this? And Kobe is being interviewed by a sportscaster, and she says, "Oh, I've interviewed you're gonna love every part of this, right? So I've interviewed thousands and thousands of athletes, and they fall into 2 camps, Kobe. Players who hate to lose and players who have to win. Which one are you?" Not missing a beat, he just says neither. And he said, if I choose one, I'm beholden to one outcome. If I choose the other, I'm trying to run away and I'm always afraid of the other outcome. But if I'm here to learn, I can be present. And 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 it feels like what you're saying is the same thing. Am I right?
Yeah, it's when I'm in these conversations, I'm wanting to learn more about perspectives I don't agree with so that, and I want others in the comment section to hear perspective that perhaps they don't see. So if someone posts something that's not nuanced, that is a broad sweeping statement that's missing the facts, sometimes I'll go in and for the comment section say, this is a broad sweeping statement. Here's what actually happened there. I'm not talking to the person. I'm talking to everyone in the comment section so that they understand what they're seeing. So sometimes I'm there to learn what the poster is going to say next. And sometimes I'm just there to kind of teach perspective because, people influence people using tactics that are not honest.
Like what? Do I do that
Um,
by accident?
So I think, if we were to look at some, using us and them, turning people on each other, using broad sweeping statements, stating statistics without nuance. I mean, the red herring, there's a whole list of these cognitive illusions that we create for people. And a lot of folks just don't understand that. They're not well schooled in the techniques, particularly technology companies are using now to really dupe people. And so most people aren't good at reading a news article.
Yeah,
They're
well,
not
I
good
mean,
at critical thinking to understand how this is being presented to skew my thinking. And so sometimes I'm there to learn what people are thinking that posted it, but often it's to teach people who are reading it how to spot it. How do I spot what's happening here? And the person posting it isn't always evil. They don't realize they're doing it either. They're passing on a behavior that's meant to influence and control people.
right. And I think it's because, I mean, part of it is because we're we're engaging more with algorithms than audiences. We're engaging more with algorithms and people
Yeah.
one on one, eye to eye. And when we're not eye to eye, when we're using technology as a proxy for communication, we're being served things to keep us hooked there, not to really engage our curiosity or to help us even notice the dips in our physiology, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in fact, they want the dip in the physiology to be the reason why you stay there. Isn't it true?
Yeah, it is. And there's some folks will say, "Why are you Facebook friends with that guy?" And I'm like, "Research, research. I get better at what I do when I'm interacting with people that may not share my values or see things completely different than I do." And so these algorithms are feeding us up the same, the same, and things to scare us. And there's a pattern to it. They show you something that scares you, then they show you puppies. And then, I mean, there's a whole, so it is we are all one conversation away from better understanding and outcomes. It might not be that conversation, but it's one closer. And so it's seeing conversations as a step, not a solution.
So is it, you said that you're friends with people that you disagree with because of research, right? But it's it's not all formulaic, is it?
Yeah, I'm Facebook friends with some folks
Yes,
because
yes,
of
yes.
research. So friends is a different thing. And so my whole career frickin' is about trying to, okay, so I wanted to be a chemical engineer. I couldn't have my business and do the frickin' labs. I felt like they were having meetings without me. So I switched to economics because you could bullshit your way to an A, basically. Sorry for swearing. Best thing I ever did, because economics is all about irrational human behavior. So from the moment I was in college, I feel like my life's mission is I want a formula. I want a quadratic formula for human behavior. I am hoping I can at some point in my career give the formula. So when you say, is it formulaic? It's a yearn for a formula. Like, what is it that is going to help us be more outcome oriented as humans? What is the formula that will help us focus on outcomes rather than all this other crap? So I don't have it yet, but that's what I'm working on.
It's so cool because I've seen you. I mean, listen, if you haven't seen Christina speak in front of a room, it's a delight. And you're not in front of the room for long. You're all over the room, and you're in people's consciousness all the way through it, and it's so beautiful to watch. It's it, and I know there's a structure to how you do what you do, but it's not obvious. It's completely invisible to anybody watching you. Even for I think that people would have to get through at least a half dozen times before they even start to see the patterns, because that's how good it is. But it's really fun to hear somebody who's so connected to what it is that makes humans tick, and you're so interested in it that you want to find the formula for it. Doesn't doesn't it sound a little bit like you're pushing against a wet spaghetti noodle?
Yeah, I think it's a lifelong practice of being curious. I truly love humans and have empathy for us. And the systems we're in are not designed for us as for the way humans function. And so rather than be angry all the time about how people function in a system, it's like, what are the tools or the ways that we could better relate to one another, given the systems that we're in? And also trying to fix some of the systems. I'm also involved in that. But I think it's a way for me to
You're
just
heavily
stay,
involved in that. Yeah.
yeah, heavily involved in that. But it's a way to stay infinitely curious and not lose my number one value, which is empathy and love for humans, like not, trying to better understand us and improve all of our outcomes.
Even with all that empathy and with all that physiological awareness, with being clear on the dips in your own physiology, are there moments where you just gasp at what's happening around you or to your face in a moment?
There's days that I play with hate a lot. What's happening in our country that is the opposite of our Constitution and kids being picked up on the street and racial profiling, like all that stuff is the opposite of everything that I hold dear. So allowing that anger and rage and even hate. So people often misunderstand my strategy to be that my strategy is to empathy and softness and good. If you have a pearl-handled knife, I'm not going to admire the handle of that knife. I'm going to turn it on you and cut you. This is not about soft, warm, fuzzy all the time. It's allowing those feelings of anger, hate, all those things that happen when we see someone murdered on the street, for example. And making decisions, though, from my values, not that hate. So it's the ability to feel all those feelings and want to go to war, do whatever, want to. But whatever decisions I make on my next actions are in my values, not the values of the person that is doing something I find atrocious. So that was a long-winded answer. Fully feel it. Fully feel it. Let myself have it. Then gather up in my own values to decide what the next step is.
I think that's a really powerful thing because it goes back to and the bridge is noticing that you're feeling this way.
Yeah.
So that you can notice that dip, you can notice that moment, and then you can find your own center again.
Yeah, and it isn't always, if people go and look at my comments section, I am not always warm and cuddly the way you explained it. Some of my strategy is using tension.
No, you can be very pointed. You can be,
Yeah.
you're
I
very
can be harsh,
gifted. You're gifted with your words.
but I do that by choice, not by reaction. When I choose to be harsh, there is a strategy behind it. I'm not reactively doing it. And so it's kind of I win either way because I'm learning.
Right.
So it's
Because that's
very
the experiment.
rare. Yeah, it's very rare that I'm reactive. It's okay to be angry. It is appropriate to have an edge to ourselves. But I want to have an edge by choice, not by reaction. I don't want to have anybody mess with my physiology and have me act outside my values unless I choose to.
Again, and that becomes a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is what are the things that you've learned through this? It's been 6 years, no, longer. What am I talking about? It's been many years where I've seen you wade in to mostly politically motivated and trumped up. I'm not using, there's no pun in that, but what I mean is there escalated tensions around left and right, and that's been, I mean, you could probably argue that since the time we were both learning to speak in front of a crowd, you say don't talk about religion and politics. So I suppose it's always been there,
Right.
but way more so now, way more so in the last decade ish or more. And what have you learned by wading
About
into these,
what
like, by
part?
wading into these conversations, doing the research that you've done in the last decade? What are some of the highlights that you've observed and learned through those interactions?
That is hard to do without teaching a class. Let me see if I can do things. One of the most common soothing mechanisms that people have is inferring. Humans make a story in their head based on very limited information, and that becomes fact. Once they infer, they see what they already believe, and so it's even more fact. And so all of the facts in the world are not going to change someone's mind if they have been inferring for a year. So we often try to help people understand by fact when that's hard to cut through people's inference. And so we just need different strategies to address that as humans.
Yeah, because we've already conflated the less than 1% of information that we have as being absolute truth.
And we made up a story in our head about that truth. And once we've made up a story in our head, then we see what we already believe, and that just makes people entrenched. And so over time, some of us get more curious and some of us get more cemented. And so inference is, I just feel a lot of folks are trying to change people's minds using facts. and it doesn't work.
What has been, and I know, look, so everybody listening, Christina teaches this stuff and is a very highly sought after teacher. And her courses, when she in the rare circumstances that she is actually offering them, they fill up fast. So this is this is not easy material for her to give in 2 seconds. You heard about 900 plus different things. But the next time I'm caught in this situation, Christina, where somebody is talking at me about their inference and I notice my physiology change, and the old me might have gotten pretty aggressive about it. And I've learned over the last decade or so that that's not aligned with my values to act in that way. So I notice how I'm feeling and I try to get curious. I'm not always successful. What are the other things I can do in that moment
Get
when I
them
notice that?
talking more.
Just get them talking more.
Get them
Ask
talking
them more
more. This is
questions.
the opposite. Yeah. Get them talking more is different than ask questions. Ask questions is kind of like empathy as a strategy.
Okay. Okay.
It's like ask questions. It's like I'm just going to ask BS questions to pretend that I'm curious when I'm not actually curious. Instead, it's like
Correct.
get them talking more. Get them, how so? Say more. If I get them talking more, I'll better understand the depths of the inference, and their physiology will often open just a little bit so that but we don't want people to talk more when they say something that ticks us off. So if someone says to me, immigrants are getting free health care, I want to jump in and say, well, actually, this is what's happening. It's hard for me to get them to talk more when I am offended by what they just said.
And then you've given them the ability to respond to what you said with more and more and more instead of just
They're not listening.
letting
So
them
it's
talk
it's
more.
like,
Yeah.
oh, where did you? How do you know that? Or what are you seeing? Or it's interesting. Just had a conversation at a grocery store with somebody over this. Asked them about, I was just got them talking more, and by the end of it, they're like, I haven't actually fact checked that. After they realize when they're sort of open to this idea that maybe they're wrong, but if I just gave them the facts, it doesn't always work. The second one that I've learned, do you want a second one or?
I'll take as many as you'll hand out.
So 30 years ago, I started teaching storytelling and I really got ridiculed and laughed at for it. That storytelling, what are you talking about? Nobody wants to hear everybody's stories. And so it was kind of my passion. It's why my company name is Allegory. And it's such a powerful thing between humans when we share examples with each other. In the last 5 years, I can count 20 people that have been in a storytelling class with me that now have a storytelling business. Like storytelling is now in vogue. It's the thing and everyone's doing it, which is causing it to lose the physiological power on humans that it had for the last 2,000 years, because now it's so transactional. It's transactional where it used to be transformational. And so what we're noticing is people leaning on personal narratives because it worked so well. It was so novel 15 years ago because it was authentic and it was different. I think what we're seeing doesn't work is just storytelling all the time. Trying to use stories to elicit a human response isn't enough at this stage. And I tell this to CEOs all the time. CEOs are being taught to tell their personal story. That is not the goal of storytelling today for a CEO. CEOs need to get the story of others and tell the story of us, of everyone. CEOs should never talk about working hard to get their team to work hard. Don't tell your Olympics story. Tell the story of the team and get their story.
And celebrate that story.
Yeah, and do it in a way that feels transformational, not transactional.
Right. That's beautiful. Christina, as has been the case in the past, I could talk to you all day. I'm so grateful that you spent some time sharing this perspective because I think it's something that you do so gracefully, and I, for one, could certainly practice this much more diligently because what I do is soothe my discomfort by walking away. I soothe my discomfort by
That's
not
distancing.
engaging. I
Yeah.
distance myself from it and I choose not to be embroiled in it. And I've watched you and some other special people engage lovingly in these conversations, firmly in other times, but I've watched you do it, and this has been so impactful to me. So thank you for sharing this with me, Christina.
Well, and love isn't soft. So lovingly means sometimes there's an edge. Love isn't soft. So I appreciate you, your blessing in this
You are.
world.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What an amazing and fascinating conversation with the incredible Christina Harbridge. Christina, thank you for coming back to the show and sharing your perspective with such depth, profound depth. Every time we speak, you stretch the way I think about conversations, about leadership, and what it really means to stay curious about human behavior. I'm grateful for the way that you approach difficult conversations with both courage and with compassion. There were so many insights in this episode that were powerful to me, but a few really stand out. First of all, the idea that our physiology drives so much about how we behave in conversations. Before logic, before emotion, something shifts inside of us, and if we don't notice it, we react instead of responding. Second, the reminder that instead of trying to get comfortable with discomfort, we can get curious about it instead. That moment where something feels tense or triggering isn't the end of the conversation, it's often the beginning of understanding. And number three, the powerful strategy of letting people talk more. Not jumping to correct, not rushing to debate, but creating space for someone to reveal the story or inference behind what they're saying. And finally, the most important insight of all, every conversation is a step toward better outcomes. It may not solve the problem in an instant or in that moment, but it certainly moves one conversation closer to understanding. And here's something to think about. The next time you notice that shift in your physiology, the next time a conversation feels tense or uncomfortable, the next time your instinct is to step away, what if instead you paused, noticed the moment, and got curious? What might you learn? What perspective might open? And what conversation might move the world even a little bit, nudge in the better direction? That's the kind of wisdom that fits perfectly on a napkin. And if this conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with someone who could benefit from hearing the message. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread these ideas to more people around the world. And of course, I'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? Write it down on a napkin, snap a photo, and share it with us on social media with the hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom. Because sometimes the smallest ideas written on the smallest piece of paper can change the biggest hearts and minds in the world. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep turning small ideas into big results. Make it a great day.